May 10, 1954, Dayton, Ohio. Engineers take the stage one after another to explain why silicon can never work. The material is too reactive, the cost's too high, the whole idea a dead end. Everyone agrees. Then a quiet physicist from an oil company in Dallas walks up and says he disagrees. His name is Gordon Teal, and he works for a firm called Texas Instruments. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out working silicon transistors. Already in production. The room goes silent. Nobody in that hall has ever heard of this company. Because Texas Instruments did not start in electronics. It started by listening to the ground. This is the story of the company that built the microchip and almost died selling toys. In 1930, two scientists in Dallas start a business detonating dynamite underground to search for oil. They call it Geophysical Service Incorporated. Nobody in Dallas thinks it will change the world. December 6, 1941. One day before Pearl Harbor, for employees quietly by the company from its founders. Within a month, the U.S. Army is asking this tiny oil survey firm to build wartime electronics. The listening equipment they built to find oil turns out to be exactly what submarines need. War rewrites the company's entire purpose. In 1951, it renames itself Texas Instruments. A young engineer named Patrick Haggerty looks at the company's wartime contracts and sees the future. The real business was never oil. It was the instruments built to search for it. In 1952, Haggerty recruits a physicist from Bell Labs, the birthplace of the transistor. Bell Labs invented the transistor in 1947, but built it from germanium, a fragile material with hard limits. Silicon could survive extreme heat. The problem was nobody could purify it well enough to use. Unknown to almost everyone, a Bell Labs chemist quietly builds a working silicon transistor in January 1954. Bell Labs looks at it, decides it's too difficult to manufacture, and quietly shelves the idea. 3 months later in a Dallas lab, Gordon Teal and chemist Willis Adcock finish their own version. They test it on April 14, 1954. It works, and it can actually be built at scale. 4 weeks after that test, Teal stands in Dayton with the future sitting in his coat pocket. Haggerty wants more than a lab success. He wants a transistor in every American home. His team builds a prototype transistor radio and starts calling the biggest names in the industry. RCA says no. Philco says no. Emerson says no. Every major manufacturer turns them down. Only one company says yes, a tiny appliance maker in Indianapolis nobody had heard of. On October 18, 1954, the Regency TR ships. It goes on sale for $49.95. That's roughly $550 in today's money, for a radio that critics say sounds terrible. It doesn't matter. Teenagers carry it to the beach, and a new word enters the language. Transistor. Almost overnight, it becomes something every American teenager wants in their pocket. Texas Instruments' revenue quadruples in a decade. But the radio was only the opening act. The A revolution comes from an engineer who isn't even supposed to be in the building. September 1958. Jack Kilby, fresh from Kansas, joins Texas Instruments with no vacation time yet earned. When the entire company shuts down for a 2-week summer break, Kilby has nowhere to go. So he stays behind, completely alone, with nothing but an empty lab and one obsessive idea. Every computer of the era needs thousands of hand-soldered wires connecting separate components. It's a nightmare. Kilby wonders, what if every component was made from the same single piece of material? Alone in that lab, with no supervisor and no deadline pressure, he starts building. September 12, 1958. His co-workers return from vacation. Kilby shows them what he built while they were gone. A sliver of germanium, hair-thin gold wire, holding a transistor and resistors on one single chip. One engineer later describes it as looking like a failed arts and crafts project. It works anyway. Texas Instruments files the patent in February 1959. The world has just met the integrated circuit. Only one person in the unveiling audience truly understands what he's looking at. His name is Robert Noyce, and he had been building the exact same thing, independently, at Fairchild. 10 years of legal battles follow before both men are credited as co-inventors of the microchip. In the year 2000, Jack Kilby wins the Nobel Prize in Physics for That Lonely Summer in Dallas. He says publicly that Noyce, who died a decade earlier, would have shared that prize with him. Only 6 of Kilby's original prototypes still exist today. One sits inside the Smithsonian. Haggerty wants the integrated circuit to have its own transistor radio moment. He turns to Kilby again. Kilby and 2 engineers, Jerry Merriman and James Van Tassel, start building a pocket calculator. By 1967 they have a working prototype. By 1972, it's sitting on store shelves as the TI 2500. 4 years later, the TI 30 launches for $24.95 and becomes the best-selling calculator in history. It flashes the word error on its screen, and an entire generation of students never forgets it. But the product that made Texas Instruments a household name has nothing to do with computing power. November 1976. Engineer Paul Breedlove is given $25,000 in 3 months to make a chip that talks. Working with 2 colleagues, he builds the world's first single-chip speech synthesizer, the TMC-0280. The voice belongs to a local radio announcer named Mitch Carr, chosen for his crisp, clear delivery. Around that voice chip, engineers build a bright orange plastic toy called Speak and Spell. It debuts in June 1978, priced at $50, and becomes an unlikely hit at electronics shows. 4 years later, Steven Spielberg gives that exact chip technology to the voice of a lost alien. Speak and Spell's voice box becomes E.T.'s communicator, and the toy becomes a piece of film history. In 2009, engineers formally recognize it as a milestone in the history of electrical engineering. By the late 1970s, Texas Instruments looks unstoppable. Then it walks straight into a war it can't win. In 1979, TI releases the TI-99/4, the first 16-bit home computer, priced at $1,150. Years earlier, TI had crushed a small chip company by undercutting its calculator prices to almost nothing. That company was Commodore, and its owner never forgot who nearly destroyed his business. Commodore buys its own chip manufacturer and gains total control over its own hardware costs. When the home computer boom explodes in the early 1980s, Commodore turns TI's old weapon against it. June 1981. Texas Instruments launches the TI-99/4A at $525. Commodore instantly cuts its own price to match. Texas Instruments cuts again. Commodore cuts again. By February 1983, the TI-99/4A sells for $150. By winter, TI releases a cheaper version at $100, losing money on every single unit sold. Their factory in Lubbock, Texas produces 5,000 computers a day, selling faster and faster into a loss. In the third quarter of 1983, Texas Instruments reports a $330 million loss in 3 months. The very next month, the company announces it is killing the TI-99/4A completely. Remaining stock is dumped at $50 a unit, then $20. Thousands of employees lose their jobs. The company that built the microchip nearly collapsed selling home computers at a loss to win a market share war. But Texas Instruments doesn't die. It does something harder. It goes back to what it always did best. It walks away from consumer computers forever and rebuilds itself around chip design and manufacturing. It wasn't glamorous. It was survival first, and quiet dominance second. Today, the TI-99/4A only lives on with collectors, and hobby programmers still write code for it. Speak and Spell units sell online for around $30, and Mitch Carr's voice still asks kids to try again. TI calculators sit on the desk of nearly every student in America, a monopoly so quiet it goes unnoticed. 90-plus years after 2 scientists started detonating dynamite underground in Dallas, Texas Instruments never stopped building. The integrated circuit Jack Kilby soldered together alone in the summer of 1958 is inside almost everything now. Every phone. Every car. Every satellite. every machine on Earth built to think. In 1954, Gordon Teal walked into Dayton with the future in his coat pocket. 70 years later, Texas Instruments is still in every pocket on the planet. If you own a TI calculator, a Speak and Spell, or a TI 99/4A, tell us in the comments. The people who kept these machines running know more about this story than any headline ever will.